So what I'm going to talk about is what do we need and why are methods important? That's our acknowledgement, which is very similar to Deacon's in many ways and to many others, but it also calls out a bit more. And I would say because all of us have operations which are very deep and meaningful, and they're not just in the same state, not just in NARM, not just elsewhere, but for example, Eora Nation and Turrbal, in our case with Brisbane. So it's kind of just important to recognize we're talking more than just in one location, and very importantly. So I've done this. I've done something a bit more than usual. I wanted to show you some figures that are worldwide. This is a talk not just about Victoria or VU or Australia. It's actually about world matters. And I'm not going to read every stat on that screen, but I found this report from the World Bank just a few months ago amazingly evocative and interesting, because we often talk about First Nations matters as minority issues or a certain percentage of a population. And the total world population of First Nations people is bigger than most countries by far. So once you start to talk in a collective way about people, the perspective changes, as you can see. And what beyond that too, in the areas that are being involved are very related to, as you've seen, not just climate change, but radical climate change. I mean, if you noticed the wind yesterday or the temperature in September is already higher than any time in the last 30 years, right here, right now. So let's talk about issues that, really connect. And the university sector is leading in much of this work, and we forget it, but let's not forget it. So that custodianship question is, for me, profound. I want to show you something too, which hopefully Tim, I'm not sure if this one, if just goes with a click.
It should.
Should do? Yeah, I'll just try. See if we go. If not, I might have to do it off the screen somewhere. Do you want to see? Yeah, it might have a little, usually has a little prompt.
It was just working, tapping on this.
Yeah, should do. See if that goes.
Sorry, we'll just.
Yeah, thank you. I did want to show you this because it's such an evocative thing.
Maybe.
Should I see? No.
Let's see.
So I'll keep talking about it.
Yeah, you can
look at that. The reason why I wanted to show you this, and I'll just start with this because time is important for all of you, is that we're also in graduations. And I was just noticing yesterday some amazing things that occurred as people crossed the stage. The question was asked in the first session, where do we reach people and how do we reach different people? If all of you have not been to graduations in your university lately, do go. Do go. If you think it's something just for academics or just for certain numbers of the executive, wrong. That is where the population meets you in a big way, in a very emotive way, and a very meaningful way. There's 1,000 people or more, probably more in many of your cases, and most of them have come to a university for the first time. And they actually see the results of the dreams and the discoveries and the labor and the work and the hard yakka, as we put it, and they see it at times of that moment. So, for example, one of the student valedictorians yesterday started off by saying, I stand before you as a failure. Opening line. I stand before you as a failure. I did my first TAFE qualification in South Australia 20 years ago, and I failed. Now, there's no such thing as failure in TAFE, actually, supposedly. You just have to repeat the whole thing again. But she interpreted it, they interpreted it as a failure because the repeating was extra work having to be recommenced. It's hard not to get out of that pass-fail language. That's a bifurcation we all face. Now, this person was the university medalist in early childhood education at VU last year, but she felt failed her first offering 20 years before. But the real measure of the person was keeping at it, going back, and seeing themselves through the TAFE system into the higher ed system and succeeding and just almost rebelling against the system. So when we talk about dual sector, it is not easy. Transitioning between is not easy, succeeding is not easy, and talking about it is not easy. I was so impressed by the value of saying that. And so I'm just going to tell you as well, I stand before you as a failure. Because in my high school, I failed woodwork, 100%. I loved metalwork. I don't know why, but I liked the mechanism or something of it. But something about the woodwork, I loved the idea, but I just couldn't finish anything. So my report card said, Adam has made many valiant attempts throughout the year, but unfortunately has not finished a single project. Fail. So I took this home. They used to give you the report card to take home in Ottawa, instead of sending it to your parents. I don't know. I guess it's a radical democracy at work. Don't know how many people changed the report card on the way home. But I being such a goody two shoes, I took it in the envelope and showed my parents. They said, "What have you been doing?" I said, "Well, I made a stool with 2 legs and not 3." I just just went on to the next project, things like that. And a lot of people are like that with education. They don't necessarily see it. No good? No. Yes?
No, no good.
Okay. I will describe this then, and you'll see what we're missing. But it goes on to this. What I was going to show you, and you can see it yourself. It's a very important documentary called Women of the Water. It was done through SBS about 10 years ago. And it features Auntie Beatrice Balangari, Gumbaynggirr woman from what's known in English as Coffs Harbour. The reason why it's shown is that is all women walking into the water near the Coffs Harbour sort of entree near the airport, which is Boambi Lake, and they're having a yarning circle up to their knees in water, talking about working together as a group of 17 people, with gender being proud, with outcomes being proud, and with results being proud. And they took that mechanism of storytelling to Venice, to the Biennale as an artwork in 2016, you might recall. So this is why I was trying to show that a method matters. That method of learning and teaching in a small group with people learning and listening to each other is what I'm trying to talk about here. And this is why I was evoking that in this outcome. Okay, if that makes sense, you can see it for yourself. But the music, the beauty of everything that's evoked there is really interesting. So standing in and around us in the environment and in this kind of honored way are people who teach in a different method. We don't always see it. We don't always see it. We have a mass method still, mostly. Except the higher up you go, it gets smaller. In my view, and in our view, the VU view, is that we start from day 1 minus 1 with a small group. You may know this. And so that's why we have something called the first year college, an entire faculty made up of every discipline in the university working together in the first year experience. And it's based on, very, very good research. And there were formerly colleagues and scholars who did this work. So that's why what you see on the screen, those things link: listening, learning, yarning, doing, not just words, actual pedagogy. And that links to what we have as our vision. I'm not going to read it all for you, but this learner centricity and protecting country coming together as a method of communication for all of us, which is a big gift. It's a big, big, generous gift. And so therefore, that's what we're trying to achieve. Everybody could say that, but it comes down to each experience of every group, right from day 1, almost minus 1 as well. So I'm going to argue this. These are the 3 things. And I'm just going to argue it. I agree with a lot of what Ian said too, but I do think you have to have a practical method for evoking it. And as long as we're into this lovely lecture tutorial kind of connection, I think it's going to fail. I think if you physically walk around campuses and look where people are and the empty spaces, have a look, do an audit, walk around yourself, see where people are not. They are not largely attending lectures in person. It's just a reality. So we've built an entire tower. You can go and see. Anyone wants a tour, we could arrange it, but not today because of grads. But it's a 26-story building. It has 9 floors, all designed by students. Every room is a different shape. Every room has writable walls. Every room has screens on all surround screens, and all the furniture moves. And there's not a single lecture theater in the whole building. And there's 11,300 students. Okay, so that's the model I'm talking about in the physical sense. But the mental sense, the researchable pedagogic sense is you honor the group and the peer-to-peer learning. It's not just me, forgive me, talking like this. Get into the zone of actually listening to each other, which is what marketing does really well. It's about listening to each other, not just, the world, one-way street. So that's why I argue that these things matter and those skills matter too. So we're actually talking about that, using that as a template for something pretty radical. So for example, let me be fully disclosing, because we're always honest in these things. When I got the job, which I love, I really love the job. Okay, I know that Ian said he loves too. We're competing in loving jobs. Who loves their job more? Probably someone out here. But sincerely, on that selection process, which was like 4 stages, and it was done during COVID. So one thing, we never actually met in person for interviews in 2021. Probably thought of being impossible. Couldn't have done that in human history before. Second thing was, at the final round, I was asked, which Indigenous elder will you nominate as your referee? Okay, that's a bit of a challenge. Don't know if we could all come up with the answer. Luckily, fortunately, I'd been working with Auntie B. The woman I was going to show you was actually a reference for me. The power was in her hands. And thanks to her, things happened, right? But I'm just saying that's a collaborative model, which I would hope we all could do. And it's kind of recognizing the fact, if you think of it, 25 years ago, there were fewer than 20 First Nations people who were really graduating in undergraduate courses at the time. Now there's 23,000. 23,000, that's a statistic. I don't call that social license, I call that transformation and radical. And it's not all successful, but it's bloody impressive. And it's one of the areas in the world where we should be much more proud than we are, talking a lot more with voice and listening to what people have to say. I honestly believe it. It's a missed opportunity for a lot of us. So that's the landscape that we're in. You know, you can see it all. Of course, you could lament and say these things aren't being handled as well as they might. But we are strong, and the sector is strong, and it's full of incredibly talented people. And that's why the sector reform can come not just from without, but from within as well. So I would argue that a bit of a radical embrace of reform of model is well overdue. I agree with Ian on that. But it will require us to stop doing some things, not do the same thing over and over again. And so the access question is also there. But let me give you a practical example. Ian talked about the Accord and about what's planned for ATEC, as we now call it. We're into acronyms in any tick of the clock, ATEC. Australian Tertiary Education Commission. Think about all those words, you know? And so they're telling us, they're thinking about a flagfall model for counting students. I hate this flagfall idea. So we'll measure students at a given point when they enter, and this is how you'll calculate how many students you can have. And I sort of asked the question, how does that relate to the equity aspiration that you've enabled and ennobled 3 years ago? How does that, if you're really going to control the system in a way which makes for success for people, doesn't that all talk about first year to second year progression? Doesn't that talk about success? Doesn't that talk about group work? Doesn't that talk about deepening knowledge? And how do you measure all that? I haven't had an answer yet to my letter. But that's the kind of question, because the outcome is going to be much more important than just that point in time. But the point in time is what will be measured on. And that will dictate so much, right? So just sharing with you, it's not just a communication challenge, it's a fundamental challenge. So here we go. This is what I'm arguing. And any of you worked as what they used to call jackaroos, or ever done work in the outback? You know, that kind of thing? Riding horses, looking at fences, checking if they had holes that need mending. It's a great job, right? Anyway, they used to call those boundary riders, right? So kind of dictating the borders. We got too much of that going on. What's your catchment area? That's the equivalent of the boundary riding. There's no such thing as a catchment area anymore. Everyone is everywhere. I'm a deacon talking as if I belong. This wouldn't have happened some years ago. I'm wearing a UNSW Indigenous badge, and not one from VU. It was given to me as a gift by Leanne Holt, one of my greatest colleagues, and she said, as I give you this gift, you must wear it in public. I'm honoring that commitment, okay? We work together in the sector. You're all colleagues. Enough of this, you know, versus. I'm sick of the versus. You know, seriously, we've got to work together more. And I think that's one of the challenges. So that's what I've just said before. I won't read it. But all of it makes a sense. If you think about it, these models of education, there's a bit of an attempt in Melbourne to do things differently, okay? Melbourne model, a bit different. A bit like liberal arts universities in the US plus a postgrad degree, single shot, you accept someone from the point of entry, right? That's a model. Ours is a model. Fed Uni's trying a model, which is more like the co-op sandwich model. But we need far more. Ask yourselves what your model is, because then you can talk about it and talk about it with the world. And then the whole social licensing follows much more according to what the results are for people, not just for us and for our budget and bottom line. I agree with that. But human-centered. So this is an example of TAFE students. I love this fact. And by the way, that same building that I said, the tower, 3 floors have got the following hands-on therapies mixed together. Physiotherapy, osteopathy. From next year, there'll be chiropractic as well. There's a very, very interesting degree called dermal, as in skin, science. And remedial massage and other TAFE therapies that are mixed in the same entry. So the clinic, when people come in to be, you know, the patients from the public that come in, subsidized, they come to one entry point and go to any room for any of these different things, just like they would in the world of a clinic that you would attend if you needed help beyond graduation. So it's the real thing. It's like authentic. It's not a simulation. There's actual patients in an actual clinic paying actual money, having actual therapies and being observed. But it's mixed. So you would not know which people are TAFE and higher ed. In fact, I laughed because somebody said, "Where's the thermal clinic?" Someone said to me. I said, "The thermal science clinic, that might be in the engineering faculty, but I think you want the dermal science clinic." So this was on a cold day in the winter. Anyway, but you get the ideas. So look at this international, the culturally diverse nature of where we are. Now that's a little bit sounding like I'm disagreeing with myself and saying it's a geographic catchment area. I'm just saying those are suburbs from which people come. And they're sort of in the orbit of VU, not just. There's more students coming from there and going to RMIT than us. Still same suburbs, right? But look at how diverse they are. So I would argue that this city, this whole endeavor, and certainly the west of Melbourne, is one of the most pluricultural in the world, not just in the nation. So therefore, our university has a chance to be one of the most pluricultural in the world, right in the top 10. Does anyone even talk like that anymore? Or did it say, Again, methods and models matter. So instead of like agreeing that, oh, the multicultural project has failed, which I think some people seem to be suggesting, we argue the reverse. We're running towards it hard and saying this is really worth celebrating. And what I'm going to do this afternoon, with your permission, when I speak at the graduation, I'm going to ask everyone, the 1,000 people in the audience, and say, thank you so much. You'll notice that 47 countries just crossed the stage. Just out of interest, how many of you in the audience speak more than one language? You did this last time, yesterday, and it went up to 6 languages in the room. 6. I only speak 2. I feel like an idiot. You know? But imagine what that is. I said, that is the modern Australia and the future together that you can see around this room. And they clapped for each other, not for us. That's our job. Okay, that's what I'm trying to suggest. So this is just a few stats to show you the block model. So this is not just without evidence. We like evidence because we believe that research matters in application for people. That's where we're right up to. And more stats today on student satisfaction are going there too. That's the block model as it began, and student numbers. 70% of people quote the model now when they apply. 70%. And I think it's increasing percent each year. And we're not just saying to people, quote the model when we interview you. We're just saying, why are you coming? Open question. Asked wherever it could be. Ask questions at the tram stop when people are waiting. That's a good place to get people. And so this is just stats as well. Please don't take too much time looking. But this one really is interesting. 42.2% of higher ed students are the first in their family to go to university in our place. And guess what? The federal government does not measure that stat. It's not deemed to be worthy of measuring for equity definitions. Somebody has decided. Did you know that? It's not allowed to be measured for the money that we receive or will receive or you'll get or the people do or support their learning or research in higher ed. Other things matter too, and they do. But I think that's kind of really narrow-minded, right? And look at the success rate. Same thing with TAFE and the same thing in higher ed. Don't forget, we are dual sector. So it's a third TAFE and a third higher ed, but it's blended, diversely modeled, and completely integrated. So here's an example of one person. Oh, sorry, time. Right, there she is. Again, graduated just yesterday. And I just wanted to show you a face of an actual student. Like this is not a sort of campaign or a thing. All of our campaigns feature actual students, not actors or, you know, people who are pretending. And if I ever do stuff, we just do vox pops, or I do my podcast with students, this kind of thing. Like it's real people in real situations doing real things and not pretend. And I think that's important. So anyway, where are we going? It's very international. I mentioned before the world of First Nations knowledge. But one of the things that Ian didn't say is they've got, you know, this place, Deakin, has a huge, long-standing 30-year reputation in India. It's one of the most renowned universities in that country. I love the fact that Deakin's so strong in India. Well done. We're going to open a campus in the end of this, well, announce at the end of this year. You heard it here first. Don't announce it yet. But it's coming, okay? And we're working with partners there. Why did they come to us? This is interesting. Why do you think they came to us? 4 reasons. 1, they're very entranced with the model. the model of teaching, the model of pedagogy, would like to introduce it into India with us. So the method matters. Number one reason. Number two reason, we had to be in the top 500 in the world in research. Does matter. Their government won't allow them to ally with any party or other university that's not. So I'm sorry, the rankings aren't just errant for other countries, they kind of matter. Without that, will not happen. Third thing, they were very interested in our technological innovation, what we're doing in IT and AI and everything else. Because they, you know what India's like, fantastic innovation in that field. And fourth, I love this part, they liked the name. They said, we like your name. I went, you mean my name? No, I said, no, Victoria University. They said, because it's got a very regal sound to it. And I thought, this sounds awfully colonialist, and I work in this field. Are you serious? But somehow they managed to measure both the colony and the post-colony and the anti-colony all at once. It's a fantastic concept. I wish we could think about that more. It's a fascinating thing. So anyway, I won't go on, but you get the idea. So this is where it came from, just to show you. That was one of the initial proponents of the block model, where it began. Nothing ever begins without knowledge. You have to chase, trace, look at history, look at this. But the difference is, look at the size. Liberal Arts College, 2,000 students. Great idea, but only for a small number. Actually, Jane Herdlicka was one of them, you know, the former CEO of Virgin, and went to that college. Credits it as being the foundation of her career, the block model. Who knew, right? But at scale is the question. The Australian genius is to take something which is really, really beautiful and do it better at scale for people, but not lose the personalization of it. So that's what we're trying to do. Everybody, even though it's a lot of people, feels like they're part of the mix. They meet us all, and they really get to know the people who they're with, the people who are teaching with them, and gee, it's great. By the way, I still teach in this once a year. Got to learn what it is. You've got to do it. If you're not doing it, why are we in the profession? If you're not researching, why are we in the profession? We love the profession, so let's practice it. I know many of you are doing. Anyway, these are models, and we're just saying, why not talk about it as a model for the world? These are other educational that have gone global. Italy is very overweight in educational models. Have you noticed? I mean, there's more than this, but there's at least a couple, you know? And if you can say Montessori, and also Reggio Emilia, another Italian one. Go around Italy, have a look. It's a fantastic hotbed for educational innovation. And we don't think about it that way. But it has influenced early childhood education worldwide. Maria Montessori, full disclosure, my mother was a Montessori teacher. I'm very influenced by it. But the IB, you've all seen your students come from that background. Another model. And ours, we're going to make it in such. So we've already trademarked it in this country, in the UK, in Malaysia's coming, India, we're talking with our partners. You've got to be seen and known for things. And we should be proud of them, okay? That's my view. So to summarize in the end, we heard about the backyard a bit, we heard about the front yard, but the world really interests me, interests us, because that's Australia, to and from. And if you look at this, all these things together, that's kind of Victoria University. So we're saying industry at the core. We're actually saying, unless you have an ethical, aligned industry partner physically on the campus, it's not a campus, not a simulation, the real thing. So next door to the Dean of Law's office is a law firm, a practicing law firm, an intellectual property law firm with 9 female partners. I love it. And they teach into the program, but then the students get to see, how do you run a law firm anyway, this mystery? How do you do your quarterly financial statements? How do you do the cybersecurity protection? How do you do the finance? That's what I'm talking about. So you welcome people in. And then that's another example. Largest hospital in the state, opening next February. It's literally 70 meters from where our offices are. I love this. Cross the bridge, you know? And you could do samples, research, whatever you like. So I mean, there are many of you who would work in universities where this is possible. Griffith, for example, same sort of model. Great thing, you know? Embedded Gold Coast hospital with the university, huge opportunity to tell more stories, okay? And that's why, you know, we're saying more. Forgive me, I've got about 3 talks I could talk to you about here, but I must wrap up. But that's why I'm saying industry at the core is the theme. So to summarize that, these are just all partners we signed with in the last 4 years. I didn't do it. Everyone else did it. They come to us, and if we listen, we do. You'll notice that they cluster into areas like health, transport, engineering, IT, and also sports science. So we're ranked 7th in the world in sports science. But if you ever are interested in seeing an AFL football team at the core, go and see the new site of the Western Bulldogs. Sadly, not in the finals this year, but they're still an interesting team to watch. And we have a massive sports science operation physically on the site. And ARNet recognizes it as a part of the university network. So they can then use all that stop motion stuff for their training 100 times faster than any other. Well, as you know, we have this advantage over the world that we hardly mention. ARNet is huge. We live with it every day. You wouldn't know with that embedded video, but anyway, we'll fix that later. And this is a final example for next year, opening at the VU World, first in the country of its sort. We're the oldest in offering paramedicine. Check out that action, because we're talking about in country areas how people don't have enough doctors and GPs. You take about 40% of the paramedicine curriculum and about 30% of the nurse practitioner curriculum, you've got 80% of the medical curriculum. Did you know? I didn't know. But let's look at different models, because we can't afford to do the same thing over and over again. So that's an example. And then finally, the kind of thing that we're talking about before. Let's protect ourselves, but do it well. This is rating its socks off. It's a TAFE operation. It's a TAFE diploma that people do after any degree, and it's a diploma in cyber. We don't have enough teachers to teach it. That's our only problem. The scale of demand is unbelievable. So there you go. That's my final slide. We're planting trees. And I love this. This young person here was in charge. And I think any of you know children, they instruct. They instruct you a lot. And if you listen to them, well, that's a great thing. So what we're hoping to do here is listen to you in the same way, and let's plant 17,500 tertiary trees together. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Adam, thank you. Thank you so much. Now, there's a whole lot there. You've taken us from Indigenous culture and thought through to cybersecurity.
Yeah.
First question. The universities of the 20th century, certainly, have their origin story is around Bologna. It's around Plato. We have never attempted to embed Indigenous culture in our origin story or in our foundation. How are you actually going to sell that?
That's not easy. Having been to Bologna, how many of you have been to Bologna, by the way? A few? How many went to the Anatomy Museum? Anyone go there? Because there's a reason why I'm asking that question. It is the oldest in the world, and it's like in that sort of tower, internal tower, and you go down bottom, and then there's a table. And then there's 800-year-old experiments that people did. And everyone thinks that's so ancient. Like they did anatomy 800 or 700 years ago, and then it's kind of gruesome in a way, but the scale is nothing in comparison to First Nations knowledge. But yet we talk about it as that's where it all began. That's our origin story, right? And our origin story actually is listening and learning and hearing from others. That's what we do best. Like it's the peer-to-peer thing, the group thing. And guess what people do in the world of work? That too. So that's the link, I think.
But how are we doing in retrofitting the Indigenous story then into our actual story? Because it's a nice to have.
Sure.
That it's seen as nice to have, but it's in reality, are we really embracing that?
Well, I don't think so. No, I mean, we could, but there is no, for example, First Nations University yet. There well and truly could be. And on the ACU model, shall we say, those who worked in that wonderful institution, imagine that as a possibility that, the federal government might get behind and do well. And we'd all be part of building a different system. That's the kind of thing you could do. Now, for the existing universities, ask yourself, do you have First Nations people in all your councils? Do you have First Nations leaders on some of your major committees? And do you do the kinds of HR things that I described before if you're serious? Okay, that's the kind of thing. So I never think you can be totally one thing, but at least being open means that you can transform.
Now, get your hands up for questions as we go. I've got a couple more to keep us going. You said we need to stop doing some things.
Yeah.
What are they?
Well, stop competing over the same area with the same courses 4 times over, because it's really silly And so, for example, at the time when I was at Southern Cross, we were in, Lismore, which is a very challenged area, okay? Environmentally challenged. Look at the flooding. Amazing, right? But there were many other universities visiting and recruiting in that same town. Well, it was just depopulating the town. Like people were not even wanting to stay and rebuild. So it actually had a negative effect on the policy of the place, at the same time as there was a university which was really, really good, but didn't have the deep pockets. So I just think we've got to think in terms of nation building a bit here and not just market share. That's my view. Market share is a little bit damaging, We can do much more together. Give you an example.
How do you do that as a marketer? Say we're not all vice chancellors, but some of us are, say, in the marketing space.
Yeah.
How do you say to your VC, hey, actually, we're not going to go and recruit over there?
Oh, okay.
Even though there's students waiting to come to our university.
Well, let's be practical. You can't do it everywhere. And some people say you're mad. But we have a very good example of what occurred in Brisbane, for those of you who are from Queensland, where languages were under pressure, okay? And an amazing program, which was called Bula, in Fijian, was created, Brisbane University's Language Alliance, okay? So QUT would teach some, and UQ would teach some, and Griffith would teach some, not the same. And then the point of entry was shared, and people would get credit amongst all. That kind of thing. It can be done, And I just think that's a sensible way to organize yourself, especially for thin disciplines where you don't want to lose them. Yeah? So the big debate about humanities and music schools and so on could be a great example there. Instead of having, 3 or 4 popular music programs which compete, you might say, this university will do popular, this will do, you tell me, and the VCA will do the rest, or something of that sort. But it requires a bit of discussion amongst the groups. And then you market the total concept, not just the shard in the middle.
Great.
Okay, can be done.
I think we've got questions here.
Hi.
No, it's you.
Sorry, Kylie Devine from CQ University, which is Queensland's only dual sector university, as you would know. Thank you for your presentation. Very interested in the block model for obvious reasons and appreciate you sharing. I would love to know, firstly, how marketing was involved in the development of the block model, and any advice you have for marketers in a transforming institution who are trying to change the way teaching is being delivered as to how we can play a role there.
I'll start with the second one first, Kylie, if you don't mind. I have very deep respect for marketing as a discipline because it is actually both a science and an art, and a very much a psychology-based discipline too, human behavior. So, there are vice chancellors with that as their PhD discipline, for example, So I would never say it's just an office or a thing. It's actually the way we tell this, it's a storytelling discipline. And you notice that that's the whole theme of this, is storytelling. So therefore, who told the story at the time? We did have pretty good marketing, but I've got to say in the last 5 years, it's improved out of sight because the actual connection has shifted from the block model being us to the block model being the recipient, the student, the participant. What is their story? Because I think many universities make the mistake of saying, it's all about us. We're so great. We do this and that and the other. But the students want to know what's my possibility? How do I see myself in this future? So that my advice simply is to say, student centricity is the #1 game, no matter what you do. And you have to know your students. I bet you know them really well, And I think that's one of the great advantages of dual sectors, dare I say it, triple sectors to come. I look around the room, it's the model of the future. But knowing that there's a continuum of education from any age to any age, you cannot cut off that possibility. So high respect, good listening, improved out of sight. And I'm not saying that because my colleagues are in the room, I actually believe it, but it's actually a vital discipline for telling stories.
Right.
Ray Fleming, loved all the stories. The question I've got is around change.
Yep.
Change in higher ed often involves a lot of friction, and
Correct.
friction is heat, noise, and you get it wrong, fire. And it appears at the moment there's like a lot of that happening in some of the change in the sector.
Yep.
So what's your advice for people about handling that friction piece in change? Because you've just delivered a beautiful frictionless story.
Yeah. Well, no, I didn't. I was telling you a lot about what the results are. But on the way through, not just smoke. This is not like Survivor trying a fire challenge. I mean, this is fire, a lot of way through. And there were people who opposed the introduction of that model, tooth and nail at the time. Many of them are now the strongest and true believers in it. That's the interesting thing. So I guess what I'm saying is, to make up a term, stick-to-itiveness, actually resilience, rigor, and sticking with it. A bit like the woman I talked about from the graduation yesterday who failed the first time. So just because there's resistance, and often there might be resistance from the AEU or the NTU or others, fair enough. It's a new thing. Everyone's doubting it. Why wouldn't they question it? They've got every right. But if you're an academic, you say, let's look together at the evidence and not just judge immediately that it's no good. So the first meeting is always going to be hot when you're doing something like that, a radical change. You would never expect anything other. Imagine saying, we're going to upend the entire universe here, go with us. They'll say, show us how it's going to work. And for professional staff, the same. So we have this mantra that says, not just the old, I think you heard Ian talk about parity of esteem. That's good, but generally in the past, it's been about research academics and teaching academics. To me, that's just the beginning. It's actually about professional staff and academic staff as one, First Nations and non-First Nations as one, talking about the sectors, TAFE and higher ed as one, and everything else that we mentioned. So to me, once you start talking about that model, you have to approach the union and say, we want to work with you, but there are things that have to happen because we're at risk. This whole world is at risk. Can we do it together? Okay, so I'm not shying away. We've had a whole enterprise agreement, negotiation that went for about 10 months, and it was hard, but you don't hear about it because it was managed. But there were times in which, people would say things like, email the Vice-Chancellor over the weekend if you have any problems. 12,000 emails. I didn't answer all of them. I tried, you know what I mean? But this is the kind of thing that goes on. So let's not pretend it's frictionless. Sorry if that looked too smooth. It isn't. That's just like what is under the water is very much moving fast.
Got another question down at the front.
Hey, Rob Hughes from the University of New England. I'm really curious on this concept of working together.
Yeah.
We're under a challenge right now. We're the only university that hits all of the benchmarks of the University Accord already.
Yeah.
So percentage of HEP-based students. As policy pushes larger universities towards those goals, our natural cohort comes under pressure. How do you think we navigate this where the larger universities from policy direction will start coming for the areas that the smaller universities naturally serve?
Sure. I think that's an Australian question. It's not a world question, first point. So that's what I'm trying to get at, is that the model of us having, from offshore to onshore students in the way that we've done for international, I don't think it's going to work like that forever. There will be that, but it's also, that's why we're looking seriously at embedding our operations in another country as well with the model. So can't advise your leadership, but I'm just saying it isn't just the backyard, because you've got a wonderful, beautiful, amazing backyard. I know it quite well. And also at Southern Cross, we were very respectful, even like the Great Dividing Range was kind of like one side, and, the other side, this kind of thing. People were respectful, yeah? But in the online world, there's no such thing as a catchment area. And you were online in, UNE early on, big innovators, right? Now, lots of people have just kind of caught up because that's the nature of the world. But again, I say there, what are some of the world degrees that are coming? How's Australia going to meet that? So at the moment, there's probably just one, maybe MBA, maybe PhD, but you can't really do it online, in that fully. So what's next? If you're running the UNA show and you're saying, we could do a world degree, what would it be? I mean, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Rather than just lamenting the fact that people are going to, look, competition is there, but it's never going to be 100% successful because there's only a certain population of Australia. And much as people say, make it everybody can study, what if they don't? What if they just choose to take something that's sourced offshore themselves, which they can do any tick of the clock? So I'm just saying, I wouldn't obsess about the local area as much as that and worry about, the equity thing you're doing so well. You're doing it brilliantly. People will come for that, for sure. But I would be looking at those other things. But that's just my opinion. Yeah.
Got time for one last question, Mike?
Yeah, Adam.
Do we have
Oh, yeah, maybe two.
two? Okay, two last. Two last short questions would be great.
Adam, Michael Burgess, hi. I've watched with fascination what you've done at VU, and I know it came from a position of not having a choice, which helps. I'm going to channel Clayton Christensen here. Innovator's Dilemma, disruptive innovation. Incumbents, it's impossible in any sector really for incumbents to truly disrupt themselves. I now work across the sector, and this is a question that's constantly on my mind. Outside of what great stuff that can be done with an existing heritage model, how do we start to infuse true disruption into the sector that everyone can benefit from? Because otherwise there's a lot of pop-ups, a lot of organizations out there who will start to cut our lunch. Oh, well, sure. And we all need food, you know, everyone needs it. So, and students more than most, right? So what I'd say is the models matter. Getting back to this theme, I'm trying to be very clear. The accepted models are quite rightly under pressure because people are not seeing the value, the timeliness, the balance with their working lives. Most students, I'd say 98% of our students are working, if not full-time, 2/3 of the time. Okay, so what's your model that's going to meet that? First question. Second, if you really believe in research, and we do deeply, what's the value of the PhD, for example, in the future? How will that work? How will that change? We talk about it as if it's an undergraduate game. It is not. The profession, if it is going to be a profession like it is, relies on people doing great research and PhD and learning. So put one thing out there. If indeed most disciplines require outstanding publication, outstanding public knowledge, very often in groups, have a look at papers. Why is the PhD only given to an individual? Just ask the question. Why would you not consider a future where 3 or 4 people could work on a project, publish on a project, and change the world with the project, and 4 of them get a PhD at once? I'm just saying it's that kind of thinking. We cannot be hidebound with just things that have been done because they have been done. That's an example just to consider. And by the way, I'm not saying we're doing this, but we're considering, as one would. That's just an insight, okay?
And our last question over here.
Sorry. Hi, Gemma Anderson from Open Universities Australia. I think what I love about the block model and the message you're sending is that diversity of models brings diversity of choice, which means learners are in a better position to find the model of teaching that works best for them and helps them to succeed, which I think in a lot of cases starts to answer the competition question as well. I suppose as you sort of go on that journey, how the guidance that you're giving to the marketing team in terms of who this is best suited for and who it's not suited best for, how you're defining that, and then how you're signaling that to students through your marketing.
Sure. Oh, I love this question. Thank you. It's really good. You're assuming that I'm giving guidance to them. I respect my colleagues more than that, okay? And their deep knowledge. I may be a generalist, but I'm not a marketer in that field. My field is literature and race relations and so on. You see the issue. We've got to respect people for what they bring. And so it's all about hiring the right people in the first place, first point. And I think that's crucial, how you go about doing that and where we, look. Secondly, how often do you meet and in what circumstance? And what's the level of trust? I have the highest level of trust in people who work with me, both in my direct office, chief of staff, head of comms, these kind of areas, and also the so-called marketing area. But actually, it's about changing the world for the better area, telling the story area, we can't live without you area. And once you start talking like that, people get the message. And then they listen without your authority to those people. I think that's the key. Listen, and if any of you are not, cutting through, I don't know why you wouldn't, because you've all got great talent, you're here today, then that's a pity. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Adam.
Okay.
Enlightening as always.
All right.